Good day. I'm making this video today as a brief update on the situation in Ukraine to the extent that I can gauge it. Before I do, just again a reminder to anybody who's watching this video on Rumble that if you go to the top of the video and you see the red maroon button there, you can press it. That will take you directly to our locals homepage where you can join the Duran community, participate in my Wednesday live streams and publish your own exclusive content. Well, this is going to be a relatively brief video because it comes back to back on my earlier video about the first round of the French presidential elections. But I think an update on the situation in Ukraine, the actual situation in Ukraine, is always to some extent useful. At least it seems to be appreciated by many of you, my viewers. So this is the current situation to the best extent which I can understand it. The first thing to say is that the fighting in Ukraine continues pretty much as always. The perhaps most visible effect of the fighting across Ukraine is that the Russians continue to engage in long-range missile strikes on installations all across Ukraine and have been increasingly targeting the transport network. One of the targets last night was a facility in the East Ukrainian city of Dnipro, a city which the Russians still refer to by its old Soviet name, Dnipropetrovsk. Dnipro, by the way, is the third biggest city in Ukraine. Well, the Russians claim, and so far as I'm aware, this claim has not been disputed or contradicted, that a missile strike on Dnipro destroyed the airport there and also destroyed the S-300 system that was supplied to Ukraine by Slovakia, about which we've been seeing so many pictures of over the last few days and about which there's been so much commentary in the Western media. The Slovaks published pictures of this system trundling forward towards Ukraine. I said that it was an old system dating from the 1980s and that it would not make any decisive impact on the war. Well, the Russians claim that they've already destroyed it. If this is true, and I've no reason to doubt it at the moment, all I would say is that this has been a debacle. The Slovaks were persuaded to part with this system. They sent it to Ukraine. They're getting a Patriot system in its place, but this has not helped Ukraine in the slightest. This old, perhaps not quite obsolete, but certainly outdated system, all that it did was provide another target for the Russians, and they destroyed it almost as soon as it reached the area, the vicinity of the battlefield in Ukraine. There have also been other Russian missile strikes across Ukraine. There was a massive one apparently near Nikolaev, which the Russians say attacked an ammunition depot, and apparently this was a giant explosion heard all over Nikolaev. There have been more missile strikes on Odessa. There was, as I said, the devastation of the airport at Dnipro as well, which has now been apparently rendered out of action. But the main fighting, as always, in Donbass, at least for the time being, is happening in two places. One is Mariupol, and the other is ETHEREUM, or rather the area around ETHEREUM, where the Russian forces seem to be steadily, incrementally moving southward, approaching ever closer to the main concentration of Ukrainian troops in the Donetsk region, who are now increasingly concentrating around Kramatorsk and Slavyansk, these two cities in Donetsk, which were at the epicenter of the rebellion against the Maidan-installed government of Ukraine in 2014, and where the Ukrainian forces in Donbass, or at least in the Donetsk region, appear to be concentrating in order to make their last stand. Now, I read a comment attributed to Zelensky today in which he says that this is going to be the major battle and that he cannot be certain that Ukraine will stand. Now, I'm not sure that this is true, but if it is correct, then it is the first admission I've seen from Zelensky of the possibility of a Ukrainian defeat at any place over the course of this war. But I don't want to push this too far because I haven't obtained the entirety of Zelensky's words, and these can be so confusing at times that I'm not even absolutely sure that the information he's providing, that this record of what he's saying is accurate. In the meantime, in Mariupol, I've also seen what claimed to be a statement by the deputy commander of the Azov forces in Mariupol, and also a statement published by what appears to be the command of the Marine Brigade, the Ukrainian Marine Brigade, which alongside the Azov battalion has been defending Mariupol. Now, I'm not going to read out what these statements say, and I'm not going to provide links because, again, these comments, these statements I've obtained from Russian sources. So they've been filtered by the Russians, and I can't vouch for their total accuracy. But for the record, at the same time, I think that they probably are accurate. They read plausibly to me, and I think that these are actually real statements by real Ukrainian commanders and forces in Mariupol. And what comes across from both of these statements is intense bitterness towards the authorities in Kiev and a sense of betrayal. Both say that they have been given at various times assurances of help, which has never come. The deputy Azov commander says that the officials in Kiev have now become increasingly reluctant to answer calls when they're put to them by people in Mariupol, the remaining holdout forces in Mariupol, principally now in the Azovstal steelworks. And the comment from the Marine Brigade is that they've also been essentially abandoned to their fate, that opportunities for them to be withdrawn from Mariupol existed but were never utilized, that there were opportunities also to reinforce them or to provide opportunities to relieve the siege of Mariupol, and none of that has happened, and that they too feel abandoned and betrayed. Now, that may be consistent with the fact that I've also heard reports, and I want to stress these are unconfirmed reports, that there's been another mass surrender of Ukrainian Marines from the Azov, this time troops directly defending the Azovstal steelworks. Apparently 170 of them gave up and surrendered and went over to the Russian side. Now, again, I want to stress these are unconfirmed reports, but they would be consistent with the two statements that I've mentioned. So it does look as if these reports are correct, morale is collapsing on the remaining troops, the Ukrainian troops in the Azovstal steelworks. The officials of the Donetsk People's Republic have now raised the flag of their republic over the chief administrative building in Mariupol, and they now say that they control 80% of the port, whereas I think previously they were saying it was 70%. So the port is now almost entirely under their control. Well, this has been a grinding battle in Mariupol, but as I said, it does seem incrementally, step by step, that it's coming towards its end. Now, these statements may suggest that more surrenders in Mariupol are coming. The Russians now say that there are up to 3,000 troops, Ukrainian troops, still holding out in the Azovstal steelworks, the Illich factory, and the port area. So up to 3,000 suggests less than 3,000, and it does seem as if resistance there is starting to crack, or at least is cracking, perhaps not starting to crack, but is definitely starting to fall away. Well, we shall see. For the rest, I'm going to say that expectations that some people have that the resistance in Kramatorsk and Slavyansk by the Ukrainian army will be comparable to that in Mariupol is a proposition that has yet to be tested. I think it's more likely that it will be more like the Battle of Debaltseve, which took place in 2015, where a Ukrainian force of 30,000 men, similar to the size of the Ukrainian force that's now concentrating apparently around Kramatorsk, was also encircled and eventually was extricated following diplomatic action by the then German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who flew to Moscow and entered into private discussions with President Putin, which eventually, through a complex further process, resulted in the signing of the Minsk II agreement. The Russians seem to be in no mood at the moment to countenance anything similar to Minsk II. In fact, they basically said that they're not interested in any Minsk III. So I doubt that there will be that kind of settlement this time. But I also doubt that these forces in Kramatorsk are going to hold out for as long as the forces in Mariupol did. In Mariupol, the Ukrainians have been digging in for 8 years, building up their fortifications, working out their defense plans, stationing their troops, thinking out how they were going to defend themselves in the city. And of course, many of their best troops anyway, and their most motivated troops anyway, were concentrated there. I doubt that the same will apply to Kramatorsk. Now, on the subject of the Ukrainian troops, the identity of the Ukrainian troops in Mariupol, in my last program, I speculated that over and above some of the people, the troops in Mariupol, who apparently have been using, or the Russians are claiming, have been using Western languages, it seems that most of the fighters in Mariupol are Ukrainians. And in connection with a discovery about a week ago by some Donbass militia of a beret and badge suggesting the presence of a French Foreign Legion in Mariupol. A viewer whose son is an officer in the French army has contacted me and has said that, to his knowledge, there was a mass desertion of Ukrainian troops serving in the French Foreign Legion. Many of them returned to Ukraine at the outset of the war to fight for Ukraine. And it's possible that this badge and beret that was found in Mariupol is from one of these Ukrainian soldiers and is not indicative of the presence of any French soldiers there. I pass this on because it seems to me that this is reliable information, and though again it doesn't in itself establish the identity of the soldier who left behind the beret and the badge, it does seem to me that there's a good chance that this person may have been Ukrainian. Anyway, that's, I think, a broad overview of the military picture. The other thing that is happening is that the Chancellor of Austria is now flying to Moscow for talks, presumably with President Putin. And this is an interesting and curious development, and one which apparently the Austrians did clear with the EU leadership, but which the EU leadership were most unhappy about. Also, I understand from the Financial Times, and importantly, which the Austrians also discussed with the Germans, or to be more precise, with Olaf Scholz. And there's been more criticism of Olaf Scholz. There's a report in the Daily Telegraph that Olaf Scholz tried to block the visits of German politicians to Kiev, which I find interesting. Now, I'm not going to speculate too far as to what the purpose of this trip by the Austrian Chancellor to Moscow is, but he does have the look of an emissary probably being sent by Olaf Scholz and some people in Germany to try to conduct negotiations with the Russians. And that does remind me again of that lightning trip to Moscow by Angela Merkel back in 2015, where she met with Putin whilst the Battle of Debaltseve was underway, whilst the Ukrainian troops were surrounded by the Russians. It does have something of that similar quality. And, of course, the point of sending an emissary to Moscow, or of going there yourself, is that, of course, you can meet with the Russians and conduct, if you like, even one-to-one meetings. Putin speaks German, for example, with senior Russian officials, and you can do them in secure places without having to worry about electronic listening devices and other Western officials being present who will relay back whatever you say to Washington and London and Brussels. So if you want to conduct secret diplomacy or semi-secret diplomacy with the Russians, the only real place where you can do that with any confidence of not being overheard by your allies and partners is in Moscow. And that may be the reason why the Austrian Chancellor is now being sent or is going to Moscow. Now, what will he be discussing when he goes there? I'm not sure, and I'm not in a position really to guess. I don't think he's going to find the Russians in much of a mood to compromise on the progress of the military operation. He may be intending to discuss economic issues, the gas, oil issues, for example. And of course, Austria is 80% dependent on Russian natural gas. But I can't help but think that part of this discussion may be related to the events on the battlefield, maybe another attempt to extricate Ukrainian troops from Donbass in the way that Merkel did back in 2015. I would say that when Merkel conducted that negotiation, she apparently was partly motivated by the presence of a large number of NATO specialists also trapped with those Ukrainian troops in Debaltseve. Merkel was desperate to get them out. It could be that this is the Germans and the Austrians having the same concerns about some of the people trapped in Mariupol and Kramatorsk. So who knows? Or it might just possibly be a more in-depth negotiation to try to find some way back from this extraordinary crisis that has evolved, which is now causing real economic hardship across Europe. I saw that the inflation readout in the Netherlands is now 12% in March, with every indication that it's going to go on rising there. So it just may be, that somebody in Berlin and presumably in Vienna is now waking up finally to the folly of the last few weeks and is trying to find some kind of long-term off-ramp and some sort of negotiation towards what the Russians are now referring to in various statements as a cold peace. Well, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. I noticed that the Pope has also been trundled out and is talking about an Easter truce. I don't know whether the Russians will be interested in that. And besides, and perhaps something that Francis may not have realised, the Easter truce in this part of the world doesn't start on the Western Good Friday, which is Good Friday of this week. It only starts in a week from now. So it may be that Pope Francis isn't perhaps particularly well informed about these things, though if he's not, I have to say I would be astonished. Anyway, that's where we are. We'll see what these negotiations are all about. We'll see what these negotiations achieve. We'll see how receptive the Russians turn out to be. There's been an extremely hardline statement from the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, which suggests that the Russians are in an uncompromising mood. But that's, it seems to me, where we are in the situation with respect to Ukraine today. So thank you for joining me again for this brief update. I look forward to you joining me again soon. Remember, you can join us, as I said, on Rumble and Locals and on other platforms. You can also support us via Patreon and Subscribestar. You can go to our shop and buy our famous magic mugs and other things. And of course, if you've liked this video, you can tick the like button, and you can also check your subscription to this channel. Thank you for joining me again today. More from me soon.